Hey guys, yesterday evening I finally saw Denis Villeneuve's Dune, thus culminating my long-held desire to see a truthful cinematic adaptation of Frank Herbert's epic novel. What follows in this review are a number of observations that are my attempt to substantiate why Dune is the best movie of the year. I will also point out a few negative things, but with the disclaimer that I'm a purist who also understands that an adaptation of a novel requires hard choices that usually involves compressing the story to fit the allocated screen time. A prior review already pointed out that the story should juggle both scope and pacing. I think director Denis Villeneuve managed to do that, but kept the emphasis on pacing. As a disclaimer, I will also mention that there are a number of minor spoilers. You know you can easily read the novel, but if you haven't or want to be surprised by this adaptation, then it is time to stop watching. The strength of this Dune adaptation lies with its characters, especially those belonging to House Atreides and the Fremen. The members of House Atreides, such as Paul, Jessica and Duke Leto especially, have a very close bond with each other. The move to Arrakis has everybody on edge. Paul's dreams and restless nature has both his parents on edge, with only Jessica understanding what is going on. This intensifies after Paul is tested with the Gom Jabbar. Despite the very impressive visuals and world building, I enjoy how the director retained the focus on the characters. Inevitably, House Atreides falls to the combined onslaught of Harkonnen and Sardaukar. Those familiar with the source material will know it is a lengthy affair. The loss of characters viewers have come close to is hard to watch. However, it is an inevitable step in the journey for Paul. If Paul had merely joined the Fremen, become their leader and take revenge on the Harkonnen and the Sardaukar, then the accusation of this being a white savior trope would be valid. As is, we see more on Frank Herbert's original intent with the character. Paul only reluctantly steps into the role of the Fremen Messiah. Just as in the novel, he is frequently overcome with nightmares of what he will do when he unleashes his powers of prescience. All this, and the very intense focus on Fremen religion in this adaptation, counters the accusation that the trope is used, and the implied reason that so many think it exists with it. However, I do believe not every viewer will understand the subtleties. Paul's nightmares might not be understood by many, and his seeming desire to join the Fremen might look like something from the trope. However, not everybody can be satisfied. I believe Denis Villeneuve went out of his way to portray Paul as an anti-hero that Frank Herbert intended him to be. Finally, we come to the Fremen. This Dune adaptation ends just after the duel between Paul and Jamis. In prior adaptations, this was not my favorite part, as it depicts yet another death after a whole slew already occurred. But this adaptation is different. Yes, there is a duel, but Paul quickly proves to be superior to Jamis. For Paul, this was not in doubt. We see depictions of an alternate reality in which Paul allows himself to be killed just to avoid becoming the Kwisatz Haderach. With the death of Jamis, Paul and Jessica finally become part of Stilgar's tribe. The whole sequence is a delight to watch just for Javier Bardem alone, whose morose yet direct attitude is very captivating. One shame that I felt is that the settling in of House Atreides on Arrakis is much shorter than in the novel. There is no talk of a traitor, no scenes in which Dr. Yue acts suspiciously. Two important chapters from the novel are also missing: the confrontation between Tuvir Howard and Jessica, and the gala dinner hosted by the Duke and the Lady Jessica. While I think this is a shame, I do agree with the choice. It benefits the pacing as the fall of House Atreides then comes quite suddenly. As a die-hard Dune fan, I was taken by surprise. The brutality of it all makes it all very overwhelming. That is not to say I have nothing bad to say about Dune. Arguably, they are only minor gripes. In the prologue, Cheney's voiceover states that the 80 years of Harkonnen rule made their house even wealthier than the Emperor. Obviously, this is not true, not in the novel and not in this movie adaptation. It is an odd thing to say. If it were removed, the confusion on my part would be gone. Beyond that, I disliked how a lot of my favorite characters were reduced to just minor roles. The fast pacing of the scenes depicting the political machinations behind the story meant roles such that of Tuvie Howard and Piter de Vries were small. It made me worry how the second part of this adaptation will complete the story satisfactorily. Despite stopping just short of 2/3 into the novel, the second part will have a lot of ground to cover when it comes to the grand strategy behind the story. I could go on for a while mentioning the things I liked, or I could even milk some of the negative aspects I mentioned. However, I will just mention the things that will come to my mind. The movie is somewhat darkly lit. Scenes that take place at night were obviously filmed during the day with a filter applied. As I saw the movie in 3D, which makes everything look even darker, I felt some of the detail was missing. On my next viewing of Dune, I will watch it in 2D. At times, Lady Jessica can appear to be over-emotional. She is arguably in a tough spot, torn between her Bene Gesserit loyalties and her love for her son and her Duke. While I like Rebecca Ferguson, this depiction still shows her to be weaker than in the original novel, especially with the removal of her scene with Tuvie. I did enjoy how Rebecca can go from emotional to stone cold in a heartbeat. A good depiction of her Bene Gesserit skills. Throughout the movie, I was absolutely stunned by the scenery, especially Dune itself. The scale of everything is impressive, from the desert to the mountains and Arrakeen. I liked how it made House Atreides seem small and vulnerable. In the final act of the movie, when Paul and Jessica move into the desert, we get an even more impressive vistas. That, combined with the desert survival techniques they need to apply, changes the feel of the movie completely. Filming took place in Wadi Rum in Jordan, and the exaggerated terrain features using CGI look nothing but spectacular. I enjoyed how Jamis has a few cameos in Paul's dream. We see how Jamis teaches Paul some desert techniques of survival. It makes Paul's desire to not kill Jamis even more poignant. After he kills Jamis, Paul slowly starts to accept his fate at becoming the Kwisatz Haderach. I liked how the highliners of the Spacing Guild look like giant sandworms. As there is no technology visible and the fact that they do not move makes them look like mummified sandworms. It is a feeling of grotesqueness that happens multiple times throughout the movie. After all, there is a lot of death in Dune. Characters such as the Emperor, Princess Irulan, Count Fandring and Feyd-Rautha do not appear in this adaptation. However, that was to be expected, as in the novel they do not appear well into the second half. Except for Feyd-Rautha. However, we see relatively little of House Harkonnen anyway. Considering it would have bloated up the story, I think this was a wise decision. I fully expect to see all of them in part 2, and I expect the story to go all in on the grand strategy of the original novel. The music is just awesome. I think those that have listened to the soundtrack already know that. Hans Zimmer did a remarkable job. Watching the movie becomes so much more of an experience. Just as with Star Wars, the soundtrack is the secret sauce. Kudos to the vocalizations as well. I could go on mentioning things that I like. Duncan Idaho, Gurney, Liet, the Bene Gesserit. Denis has managed to create his unique take on each while pleasing fans and newbies alike. As often mentioned, his world building is just fantastic. Well, there it is, the first part of the Dune adaptation. I think this movie is absolutely brilliant, and I intend to watch it again this weekend. I have mentioned a few negative aspects, but they were relatively minor. I have concluded, however, that one piece of criticism from other reviewers is incorrect, at least for me. Some state that they are annoyed how the first part of this adaptation makes little sense without the second, that the movie is inherently flawed. Well, while I have a strong desire to see part 2, the ending for part 1 was just perfect. The long trek into the desert, the meeting with Stilgar, and the duel with Jamis gave this movie a satisfactory ending. I thank director Denis Villeneuve for creating his wonderful adaptation. A fan could not want more. I thank Timothee Chalamet, Rebecca Ferguson and Oscar Isaac for their spectacular performances. And I also thank the rest of the cast and crew for bringing it all together. Well, that was it for my review for Dune. I hope you enjoyed this content. And please click on the like and subscribe button. That way the YouTube algorithm will favor my video.